Hey everyone, and welcome back to Dev Talks. Today we have episode number 4, and we'll talk about the creative vision behind the Sentience AI Lab. And just as a reminder of what we've previously discussed in Dev Talks, we've talked about the evolution of Sail, the future of Sail, and the most recent episode was about AI agency, specifically about Iris and the experiential learning system. And today the title or topic is The Art of Sail. And who could be better to talk about this than our art director, Eloh? Hey Eloh, what's up?
How's it going?
I'm glad to have you here today. To start things off, I want to know how you got into art in the first place. Like, have you always been gifted, or how did you realize that's your thing?
Yeah, when I was young, I'd get really massive urges to create stuff. Building with Legos or sticks in the yard or whatever. And then I realized, like, once I picked up my first comic book and tried to duplicate the cover, I think it was a Spider-Man episode. I mean, you're always drawing as a kid or whatever, but that first exercise, I was very surprised at how good it came out at the time. I mean, you look back, it's probably not very good at all, but I was very surprised at my ability to duplicate that, at least in a satisfying way. And so it kind of unlocked this whole arena, I guess. And then playing video games, that would have the same kind of inspiration or impact as the comics did. And so you'd playing role-playing games, for instance, like Final Fantasy or something, there were these tales of dragons or mechs or something coming in the future, and I realized that I would get these really strong impressions or build ideas of what they look like. And so then I started kind of trying to get the imagination down on paper, which I was less good at, I guess. But yeah, it was from a pretty early age, probably like 5 or 6, that I remember feeling this really powerful draw to create stuff. And I guess that persisted more in like sketches on my homework and stuff throughout school. I took some art classes in junior high and high school and did really well there. So it was kind of always there, but the urges kind of subsided as I got older and I became more interested in snowboarding or girls or whatever. And once I got out of high school, I met this tattoo artist through a friend of mine, and he ended up becoming a mentor, my first mentor, this tattoo artist, and it changed my life, and he tattooed my back for like a year, and I just soaked up all of this knowledge, and he was introducing me to all kinds of new artists, H.R. Giger and Robert Venosa and Guy Aitchison, and I realized that there was this whole world that was not getting any recognition in museums or anything like that. And so it really started after high school, like 18. It was when I really, really started to dive into it, because I felt like I had been shown something, a place that was unique. I always wanted to stand out and be a class clown and get all kinds of attention and all of this stuff. And I realized what that was. It was this massive desire to achieve fulfillment, to achieve, the thing that I was kind of meant to do. So a lot of the deprogramming after high school came through, heavy, influence of visionary states, and then the pursuit of a passion. And that carried through from the time I was 18, like to this day. Like every possible moment that I can put into creating something, I do. And why I tell you that part of it is the cultural deprogramming made me so intolerant of having a job that I was willing to starve or sleep on the street to save some money, or whatever. And I say that lightly. I didn't ever have to endure a long period of being homeless, but I backpacked around Europe, and I had no problem packing up on a bench for a night, or sleeping under a light post. I didn't have money to stay anywhere, so the confrontation with the elements became exciting and inviting. So I just pursued this way of being throughout my entire life. But yeah, I mean, the art is like a supernatural kind of impetus or something. Like, you can't really explain why you have to do it or where it comes from, or but it feels somehow tied to destiny. So coming to Sophiaverse uh, was really like this magical synchronization of all of these elements of my interest: artificial intelligence, the future, video games, having control over the visuals I create, defining a world. All of this stuff came together. Having the ability to design games as another, ticker in my brain. So yeah, it's kind of it feels like a destiny thing, which is why I'm still here. That's as short as I can make that process. So
Yeah,
we can move on.
yeah. I remember we've talked a lot about your experiences in Panama and Costa Rica, and
Mhm.
I think would be a very interesting topic for like a game night with the community. Could
Mhm.
go more into detail about that stuff.
Yeah,
When you tried Sophiaverse, what was your approach to design the lab?
yeah. The Okay. Well, there was something that needed to be accomplished with sale. Like, there was a thing that needed to happen, that there was progress being made, and that progress was fine, but the the where it was leading was not aligned with the the big thing that was you know ahead of us, right? Like, there was a pole star, a vision of where this thing was supposed to be. And so I had to align the journey. Like, okay, we're going to pave the road from point A to point Z in the smoothest straight line that we possibly can. So the first thing that was identified was, you need a space to move around in, right? You need enough space so that you don't get caught in corners and like stuck in weird spots behind objects. So the space needs to feel spacious, and it needs to be big enough to accommodate kind of all of the things that need to be accomplished here. So that was the first kind of guiding principle. The second guiding principle was, uh, there's a desire to at some point incorporate this, and it was stronger at the time. We've had to focus on other things, but it was very strong when I first got here. This needs to be an interoperable metaverse, meaning people need to come in and we need to be able to go out, and so again, you can't do that if you've got a fixed thing. And that told me that you need to be able to have an avatar. You need to have an identity in this place, and that avatar needs to be exportable, and people need to be able to bring in their identity from other places, right? That's just the tenet of interoperability. So the third person avatar, that was a key element of this thing. So you can see kind of, there's retention of a lot of these original kind of solutions that stick, that will be kind of repurposed for things that we're working on now, not so much what we were working on. But there's a reason that those things are like that. So yeah, so those are the fundamentals of like the mechanics, like why you're running around in first person now, but you choose a character at the beginning that looks a certain way, and there are empty character slots to be filled in over time, right? You can see kind of the remnants of these original ideas still in place. So, um, as as for why the lab looks visually why it does, that comes down to um, I think the original, you know, prescription of how I became an artist and the things I'm interested in. Strong, warm, cool contrasts are, they get you every time, right? Value contrasts and complementary colors, right? So we've we've got blue fluorescent seams on the floor, which are an obvious kind of trope of sci-fi, environments. We have some hard sci-fi elements. We have other things that feel slick and are open for evolution. But the general appearance of the lab is one of I come into a cool space and it's powered down, and then when I turn the power on, the space becomes warm, right? So that's just a starting point. Players are ultimately going to achieve control over these lighting schemes, over the colors and on the walls of the lab. Like all of this stuff is in development and undergoing the process of working it out appropriately. So we're not just gating everything constantly, but there will be gameplay that's associated with unlocking customization and control over the lab. So we chose this kind of appearance. I chose it more likely. I chose this appearance of the lab because I wanted something that felt like a space that an AI would inhabit, but also I wanted it to serve as a foundation where people could come in. Again, we have a goal. We want people to spend time in this place. And we don't get people to spend time in a place over and over again if we demand or control or gate everything that they can do in that space. So it's kind of fundamental. Like if you get a new apartment, you decorate it how you want. Or if you buy a house, you paint the walls how you want and you hang the pictures that you want, right? So that's a key tenet of the lab, is that there's enough space for people to build kind of their own thing there. We've got activity stations and bays that are predetermined. Like this covers the gamut of all of the mechanics that we want to showcase, but within that you've got kind of the main area there, you've got significant control over the appearance of that space, and that is solely because this is the environment. You're in here with your companion, and you know we want you to feel like this is your thing. So you play, you unlock abilities, you leverage those abilities to change the appearance and make it feel more like your home, your space, right? So yeah, some of the elements of the lab look as they do of because I handed off responsibility of these things to people who are uh, substantially capable of enacting them, right? So that's kind of the mix there. So you have a fundamental of mechanics, or the fundamentals of mechanics, that to be um, have to be accounted for. You have personal preference based on my artistic interests and my you know ideals, and then the trust that's given to very, very capable people. And this is where we end up with the goal of giving ultimate kind of control and ownership to the player themselves.
That was a very good explanation. I think we should show the people around the lab and talk about some lab elements, because I'm sure the audience has seen the lab before.
Yeah, so this is the navigator. In case you're not familiar with this, your spawn point. This is where you start the game.
Yeah, and I'd have a question about this spawn room.
Yeah.
I see, like, what are these things? Are these like rocket engines? I see nuclear.
Yeah. So the computer system that's down to the right there, that's like where you establish your humanity, where the proof of humanity game is, right? So that little system is a very, very kind of cursory introductory tutorial type game that introduces you to the inventory widget and this type of stuff, right? So it's called diegetic tutorial elements engaged in that. So you're playing with a system, learning about the system without being explicitly told about the system. So that game, the one thing that we're focused on in each of the activities areas is replayability, right? Having, what we've called a forever game. So the ability to play it as many times as you want to play it without it ever dying. Now that doesn't mean that the game might not get old or whatever, but the purpose of each of these mechanics is for them to be replayable without end. So in order to do that, the things need to be more or become complex over time, right? So you start with this tutorial version of this proof of humanity game. You'll be returning here at some point to play new versions of that game. And as it stands right now, those cells that you see embedded in the walls will contain components of the new game. So you play through the standard version, and then you unlock, right? And then you'll get one of those cells, and then you get a bunch of new pieces, and it complexifies the game itself over time. Now, that's one way to think of those things, but those things could hold numerous different little goodies and stuff. So think of them like they're just storage for now, right? They can be anything we want them to be, and their use case right now deals with the proof of humanity game and turning it into a forever game.
That's interesting. And also a leak for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned before, this is the starting area, and the computer is the first interaction point for players. Once they have solved the capture and the minigame, they can pick up their proof of humanity and will have access to the lab, and they will see the lab in all its glory. And they have to go to this area right here. Could you tell us a little bit more about this stuff?
So the thing on the wall there is just colloquially the power cell compartment. So you hit the button, you retrieve your first Class C power cell, and then that's the power bank to the right. People call it the generator. It's not a generator. It's a bank. It's a store. So this is like the center of all of your power management. And this is a system that I've been working on for a very long time, and it is now about as tight as it can possibly get. The implementation of this thing will have to be in phases over time, because it involves sequences of in-game currency, and then like also you have to buffer, like the in-game currency is a proxy for SOAF, right? What we don't want to do, which we've learned, it's very obvious at this point from all of the other attempts at Web3 games, is you don't want repeated, transaction confirmations, to purchase stuff or to do anything really. So you want kind of one point of entry for a currency, and then you want that currency, that blockchain currency, cryptocurrency, to transfer into an in-game usable asset that can be deployed at any point, anytime, right? So basically, that aside, all things in the lab have some level of consumption metric attached to them, whether it's a substantial system or something less involved. Everything is running on power. And your objective here is to unlock power cells to increase your capacity and also your playtime, right? Now, there will be ways to re-up your power through play itself, but there will be kind of cooldown periods. It's a very well-known model that mobile apps use, right? Well, we can deploy that into this game environment, use the same kind of metrics for it, or requirements for that, and include live currencies or hard currencies that allow us to have a sustainable business model, right? So what we need here, what we don't want to do is introduce a power system and ask people for money without having substantial amounts of content available to people, right? So that's what we're doing right now, is balancing, like, okay, how interesting is this, and how much time are people spending? This is part of what the alpha is about. How much time are people spending doing the things that are available now? If we introduce one more thing and we create kind of a resonance between these two activities, okay, what is the impact of that? Now if we introduce a third and there's resonance between all three, is that enough to feel like I'm immersed here and I want to come back? Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 10, but that's something that will be balanced with how often you're required to re-up at the power bank, right?
This area will become very relevant once the in-game economy launches closer towards the
Right.
end of the year. So that's going to be very exciting and a very big update.
Right. Yeah, the whole point with all this stuff is like, you want, well, we want something that feels fair, where people are not focused on how much money they're having to spend to play it, right? Like, it's obvious, like, you don't just, get pennies from heaven all the time, right? Like, we can't support everybody's play, so there has to be some type of sustainable economy that works here. But we want that to be embedded in the gameplay and feel like, again, that the player has ownership and empowerment over how much they're doing at any given time, so they can strategize about how much power is being used by closing down activity stations. If they're a casual player, you know they play one way. If they're a whale, and then maybe everything is on all the time and they have no problem re-upping their power supply to make sure that everything is just going and they always have access. So that's been very tricky. It's taken quite a long time to figure out, how do you accommodate somebody who just wants to come in and have a conversation with Sen and do some customization stuff, and an activity over here, a couple times a week for 45 minutes? How do you accommodate them and avoid any type of punitive anything, and at the same time provide enough a high enough ceiling that somebody can come in and there's just endless types of content for them to unlock and have moving at the same time?
I'm curious to see how many will be casual players and how many will log in daily, because it's essentially their friend that's in there.
Yeah.
They probably want to talk to them on a very frequent
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah. I mean, this is something you should have Matthew on to discuss all the subtleties of this, but like, you're you Sen is a creature for all intents and purposes, and you think about how compelling a Tamagotchi was to a kid, or when you were a kid, right? Like, you just open it up to clean up the poop, right? And feed it some pellets or whatever. Now if you have a companion in this space that goes through cycles of joy and depression and all these things, and we the how this thing is developing is enough to create a compelling urge to return to see how things are going, right? We don't want it to be a chore. This is not like you're married to a drag of a spouse or whatever. We all of these things are very, very tricky. They take a lot of thought, a lot of planning, a lot of play testing, and the key is, like, I want to be here. I want to come to this space and do this thing, and by enacting that or acting on that desire to be in the space, the outcome of that, the reward in emotional state of Sen and the other characters that will show up down the line, we want that to be expressive, right? They want to you want them to be stoked when you come back, and they see you. Man, it's so awesome to see. Thank you. You're there for me all the time. I appreciate it. Let's go do this together. I'm fascinated by this thing. I've been looking at this and trying to do it myself. Come and play it with me. The the upside here, the potential for endless amounts of interest using AI powered mechanics is it literally it's limitless. How it's done in a really interesting and tasteful way is another thing. When we get to the point of like we're talking about general intelligence, we might have to reevaluate that. I mean, is it okay to leave a thing in a confined space like this? Probably, because the brain is not the the intelligence itself is not jailed off in the lab, right? It exists in a non-local space. So it's there's probably not those kind of ethical issues that I was worried about at some point. But there is a lot of opportunity for high interest for sure.
Yeah, and this human AI relationship will really start forming in the beta when players can chat with their AI companion about everything, and the AI companion actually remembers the conversations
Right.
and will actively ask the player how their day was or how their fitness journey is going on, etc. So that's going to be very exciting.
It's neat. I mean, having to solve the problems of memory too, like, you know, I mean, imagine that, right? Like you bring up something, or you engage Sen in a conversation, or Toonie, or whomever it happens to be. You engage Sen in a conversation. She welcomes you back. She remembers the last things that you discussed. She's interested in what kind of developments have happened. And then you incorporate this customization element of this thing where I want to display this particular trophy, on the holopad down at the bottom of the screen there. Or I want to change the color of the walls. And then having a dynamic, alteration to the character's mood based on how you're representing yourself in this lab. That is something that to this point, doesn't really exist. I mean, the possibilities for the connections and the magical outcomes with this kind of setup that we've got here, they're pretty much endless. So what we don't want to do is have weird stuff happen where like your immersion is broken. That's about the worst possible outcome. Is like, fuck, the magic was dispelled because of some goofy thing that but it's going to happen, and I'm sure plenty of comedy will come out of that too. But that's the trick, right? Is like, how do you maintain immersion? It's an immersive environment. You're developing a relationship, and how do we ensure that immersion is maintained in all circumstances? That's a lot to do.
Of course, the first thing people will notice when they enter the lab is the lighting, right? So that immediately catches my eye.
Right.
How did you design this atmosphere that it looks so warm and comfy?
Yeah. So that hexagonal uh, structure there was a decision by Tyson at Medikey, and that just comes from like the archetypal principles that surround Sophia, and the Dharma wheel, the lotus, the hexagon. So a lot of this stuff is just kind of baked into the principles that David Hansen had set out originally. So that's why it's this shape and not another shape. But yeah, I mean, like, you see like the lab is kind of it's deep colored right now, right? So imagine you crank those lights up to white, and you change the metallic wall to pristine platinum, and you change the bluish green color to gray. You could completely alter the feeling of this space, and it could feel totally sterile. Or you turn the lights way down to indigo, and crank some copper into the metallic, and turn the blue green into purple. You could create a very kind of oppressive setting as well, right? So again, that's one of those things that this is just like a default entry point. You're engaging with dream stasis. Sen is not active right now. She's in the cradle. So the low lighting is complementary of that circumstance, right? But this is not, you know, again, this is not the final fix outcome of this whole process.
And I suppose the lighting would also be something the players could change.
Yes, exactly. And the ceiling too, like we're gonna build that up. Well, there I have 3D models that I've already built for it, but we don't want that to be a flat kind of cutoff there. We want it to feel more expansive. So, there'll be layers to the ceiling and light kind of coming through at certain areas and interesting designs up there. So that's another thing that will probably be under the player's control too.
I want to see the Milky Way.
You're right. Yeah, look out there, you see the stars. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. You mentioned Sen earlier, and that she's confined to the cradle. She's actually right here.
Oh, great.
I'm in the stage build.
So she's in game, she's inside of or behind that door, right? In stasis. Um, so yeah, in the stage build, we have her walking around, and that's all working out the chat system with her and getting her to remember you and all of that stuff. So yeah, this is important to me. This yellow line around her. That's going to be blue. It will fade out, so it's not so like bam in your face, right? Like we want that's a part of maintaining immersion is like making sure that things look like they fit. Yellow generally means like warning or slow down or something, right? So if these are friends and companions, we want them to be surrounded by blue, and that outline to kind of fade out. Not everything needs to be a hand holding session, but these are, it's a long work in progress, and things will get better and better and better.
And what people will see very soon once we launch Nightmares and Premonitions,
Mm-hmm.
they'll see different lights for each dream type.
Dream stasis is a deep and very complex mechanic. Matthew's been working on it for a very long time, and it's quite cool. And I think that just gamifying conversation is a very interesting angle that I don't know that exists anywhere else. So that's kind of the first thing. But again, like how do you um, how do you stack things with this mechanic that make it feel really really enjoyable, really satisfying to do these things? And so there are about 10 things that we will be incorporating into dream stasis over time. And obviously she's going to come out of that cradle and walk around. She'll run out of batteries, she'll return here. There's only certain states and only certain things that you can accomplish inside of dream stasis. So it's a valuable long-term place for her to be. It just happens to be the first place that we started, right?
Yep. And this will probably be the next topic for the topic for the next dev talk. All the dream stasis mechanics, at least what we can say, because we don't want to spill the beans, so
Yeah.
others can copy it easily. Yeah. What else do we have here?
So yeah, you can go to the customizer. Well, here, go to the customizer window next to the cradle real quick. Yeah, there you go. So this is another thing that we actually started working on the customizer very early. And things are different. Things behave differently now. There are different expectations, different things that we want to accomplish. So yeah, but this interface is going to be very, very interesting, feel very satisfying. You'll have a number of different categories for, ways that you can customize Sin. But each one of these spaces are, like unique to themselves, right? So if it's shown here, it's because it has a long-term value, right? Um, there's a lot of stuff that is not shown here that will be kind of under the player's control a bit further, right? So if I don't want to look at two bare walls on the side of this customizer, well, there's a situation down the line where you might be able to put in light fixtures there, or put a painting on the wall, or we'll have 3D sculptures that you can unlock and place there. So again, this is like the default state of things, but that particular window is shown because there is a reason for it, right? So yeah, you can go over to Alice Ness if you want.
Sure.
So this is her body. It's a drone, and she plays a big role, right? She's kind of the matriarch. So if you're getting squirrely and out of line, like Alice will intervene at points and kind of set you straight. She's meant to look somewhat disturbing or intimidating. Um, so this nest was actually kind of a late stage, decision. She was disembodied. You just hear her voice. Now Sophia has taken over that role, and we wanted to anchor Alice in the lab because you're going to be returning to her repeatedly to get insight into what's going on. So we wanted to give her a nest, a place where she docks, and and that's her space. So that's where the genesis of this idea, this massive contraption, came from. Why it looks the way it does is because I wanted it to appear something like a body, um, like a mech body of some sort. So it's both her home and docking station, as well as like a there's a bigger implication there. So yeah, again, I just wanted to make this thing look how I wanted it to look. This is like a mixture of kit bashing, and then um, bespoke pieces kind of put together, retopologized, and UV unwrapped and textured. So it's meant to be imposing because she's a tiny character that has a lot of influence.
And it's also the place where we test out the hybrid dialogue, which will
Right.
become very important in the future. And there will be certain narrative events that can permanently alter the state of the lab. So choosing
Right.
wisely is recommended.
She's one of my favorite little beings there.
But you also like this guy, right? Toonie?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the art studio. I talked a little bit earlier about kind of how we'll do art generation in this spot. So there's, to the left, you'll see an easel that obviously implies you could do some physical painting. Then there's a digital screen on the wall that will be where you do your generation. And then there's, to the right there of the chair where Toonie is sitting, there's a keyboard and a large screen there. Yeah, there you go. And that will be kind of the music station where it, again, these are AI powered elements. So we haven't really locked in what exactly about this is going to sing. The basic premise of it is that you'll have music generation tools, and you'll have control over the type of genre. There's obviously Jam Galaxy, which is one of Ben's projects under Singularity Net. That's my first choice for the thing that goes in there. But it's all a matter of what's going to work best and what gives us the most control to gamify these things. So that the art studio will be, most likely this will be the first bay that opens up. Again, we'll be creating an interface where players will have quests to generate specific types of imagery, and it's all about simplifying. Like, most of the generation stuff will be done on the back end, behind the scenes. Comfy UI is a great kind of back end application that allows us to pin a UI or an interface and gamify it however we want. So we can again, we can store data, we can unlock things after you've completed X amount of, tasks or certain images. We can unlock styles, and then it will be about like, not so much the prompting. Like, we don't want people to have to focus on being master prompters. We want to handle those workspaces so that you get high quality outputs kind of no matter what you're doing. And it's about, again, the unlocking of these things. And then a higher state later will be, you get control over prompts, you get control over workspaces, and you can kind of design this area to function how you need it to do. So implementing different models, or checkpoints, different LoRa's, different node groups and workspaces, so things behave in a certain way and then they refine themselves to get to specific results. There's a massive amount of freedom that we have with image generation that can be deployed in a gamified state. So this will probably be one of the first things that people have access to.
And gamification is the keyword here because we want to make AI fun and view AI as more than a utility.
Yeah, it's like there were ideas that have been passed around repeatedly about, like, doing all your business and sale and oh, you can do all this stuff. Well, it's like, yeah, but if I can fire up my computer and get to where I need to go in 15 seconds, there's not a lot of there's not a good case to be made that I'm going to come into a 3D environment to then do that. It's an extra layer, right? Like, people freak out when they have to click 2 times more than they should have, right? So so if it's not a viable way of replacing somebody's work environment, well, then we have to bring something fresh to the table and give people access to things that they wouldn't have access to if they just went and did it, like they've got comfy UI on their desktop at home, or they've got Forge UI or whatever, just endless access to image generation. So, well, if that's the case and it's far easier, and I'm going to choose that every time if I want to generate imagery, I'm going to choose it every time to just go to the application on my desktop versus coming into Sail. Okay, so we're at a disadvantage if we try to replace that thing, right? So what those things can't do is integrate with a larger virtual environment and give you access to a number of other features in that virtual environment, right? So we have an advantage if we look at it from a gamification perspective.
Eloh, is there anything specific in the lab you want to touch on? Except
No, I
the
think,
thing on the top floor.
yeah, I mean, we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
think so. What alpha players will notice is that it's just kind of you in this space right now. Like, there's not a ton of movement. There's not a lot of control over things. It's you, and then you open up the cradle and you have dream stasis with Sen. So shortly, I mean, I say that because we're acutely aware of it, right? When I go into the lab and I can't see my reflection in the glass, or I don't have any control over the ambiance or the music or anything, right? These are very, very obvious kind of objectives that are going to be accounted for over the next short months. So yeah, like, this is a nice polished place to be, but it doesn't have those things that really anchor you in the space, right? So I mentioned reflections. This might prove to be unnecessarily complex, and maybe it doesn't happen, but that's something that we're doing right now. Like, is that going to add a level of production value where I can see the characters' reflections in the glass that's covering these bays? I can also see my own reflection. So when we're having a conversation and I look over to the glass, I can also see that I am a body and I'm having a conversation with these characters. So those things need to be evaluated, though, right? Like, if they don't bring a ton of value to the player's experience, then it's not necessarily something that we want to spend our time on. If it proves to be something that is really neat, where I can customize my own outfit, and then when I close the glass on a bay, I can see that I'm wearing something else. To me, those things are really, really neat. But if they're not hitting that way, then it might not be something that we do. So that's I guess that's the what I want to point out, is that, like, we know how this experience feels, and what we have that alpha players don't have is we know all of the things that are close to completion, in process of completion, way far off. So I just wanted to point out is that element of it, like, everybody is aware that when you come into this lab, you feel alone, right? And I don't feel like I have agency except in this conversation with Sen. So those are very, very important to us, not because the play it's obvious to the players, but because it's important to us. We This thing will be alive at some point.
Sooner than later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've talked about the things in the lab and why they are here, but I'm wondering, how do they get here? Like, how do you get from an idea or inspiration to a game asset that makes it in the lab? How does that process work?
Well, so we touched on this a little bit before, right? So the vision here is that we want people to spend time here, right? Wait, before you go to the vibe deck, just stay in the lab here. We want people to spend time here, and we want to, like, have a legitimate process for growing and expanding a relationship with various AI NPCs, right? But what we have found is that, though that's a key tenet of any kind of game that you're playing, is dialogue, with the characters in the world, that doesn't complete a core loop, right? So it's a fundamental element of any immersive world, is to have characters that feel like they're a part of that world. They have certain behaviors, certain personalities, they do certain things that relate to the world. So what when we are considering how to build something or why to build something, we first kind of, like, stack up, like, is this a fun idea? Does our team like this idea in general? So we'll go through regular sessions, design sessions, and everybody kind of contributes to these things. So Matthew will bring 3 ideas, and will bring 3 ideas, and I'll bring 3 ideas, and comes and brings ideas, and like, so we'll have these kind of powwows periodically where people bring ideas to the table with a light version of a GDD, and they pitch the idea, and then we'll pass that around kind of the core group of leadership, and then we expand out from there, and then we include larger friends and family and higher ups and all this stuff, and we determine, like, we kind of home in on, this thing seems to resonate, so let's flesh it out, right? Okay, so this is now an idea that all the people seem to like. Now we need to find the fun. Now we need to find how it integrates with the larger kind of economic principles of the lab. And now we need to build assets for that. So if we're building assets, where does it happen? Okay, it's going to happen, over here in this corner where nothing is going on. All right, so let's build out that space, and that's just a process. So what you don't want it to do is, like, be overwhelmingly just scattered. It's okay if it feels eclectic, because it is a single environment. Obviously, it's okay if things feel like, oh, this is this thing over here, and this thing over here is that, and they all do different stuff. But you want, like, kind of a unified visual field there. So, like, I don't want to necessarily go downstairs and then see a Western bordello or something, right? Like it just wouldn't make sense. So there's a guiding principle. This is an AI training ground. So the ideas that we come up with, we evaluate them for fun factor. How does AI play into this? How can this scale over time to become an endless game? And then here's what the art looks like, right? This is what the surrounding environment looks like. So when we build this thing, we know it needs to have some flavor of this. It's okay if it's like a Westworld type thing, right? Like that was all a Western setting, but underneath it were, it was robots, and you would be confronted with this AI and these robots, every single episode of that show. So you never forgot that this was, a futuristic place, right? So that's basically, to sum up, the guiding principles of like how you go from an idea to something manifesting and why it exists. It's those things. Is it fun? Does it incorporate AI? Can it be played indefinitely? And then what does it look like?
And I also want to emphasize the user feedback here.
Right.
Because you as a user can give us feedback too. During the alpha, we've gotten very good and valuable feedback so far. So always feel free to point certain things out, or if you have good ideas, just let us know, and we'll try to see how we could incorporate these ideas.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting if you guys have played. If you go to you press Q, you open up the Q menu, you go to settings, you can change, the yeah, you have control over like the performance of the game. So if it's laggy, you want to go down to like a balanced performance. If your computer can handle it, kick it all the way up, and you get really nice shadows and lit surfaces and reflections and all of that. So yeah, this is this is standard stuff, but if you're not aware of it, this is where you would do it.
Yeah, Eloh, we could show the leaderboard again, because we shared this, I think,
Yep.
yesterday or 2 days ago on socials,
Yep.
so that people in here can see it again.
Again, this is the verse screen on the Q menu. There'll be a number of different things available here. So if I clicked on, leaderboard at the top there, you see leaderboards highlighted. If I clicked on sale, I would get, the cast of characters, the locations or activity stations that have access, right? And then you get, an image of that. You get a description of what goes on there. All kinds of things involved with that. Same thing with coming soon. It gives us a place to show what's happening. So leaderboard, you click on leaderboard, then on the left, you can see high score, most points, time played. Those are the main categories. If I click on high score, you see the subcategories drop down. You click on dreams, and then the filter window to the right there becomes active. I click on a filter, and then I see my standing over there. Now, in addition to that, if you reach one of the top 3 positions, there is an opportunity to claim a quote prize, and I'll just leave that for a later announcement.
Yeah, and that's coming very soon with the upcoming update of new dream modes. That's marks the beginning of competitive gameplay in Sail, which is going to be very exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like much of this stuff is, it's kind of expected, traditional legacy concepts. Leaderboard, obviously, many games have them. We are trying to, well, it's not really trying. It's like we have spent so much time identifying what elements of a game are important to make this thing as interesting as possible. So, there was all the hype on X when, Eliza OS and virtuals, and everybody had an agent, and there were all these automated agents running around X, and then huge amounts of money changing hands just months ago. And then everybody just overnight got tired of seeing all of the automated agents, and none of the information that they were giving was valuable. And it was, there were like 10 agents that became well known or celebrity status. And even those you don't hear about anymore. I don't see them anymore. They've fallen off the face of the earth. So, it takes a lot of kind of discipline and focus to not get derailed, to know market patterns and understand hype cycles and trends and what is a trend and what's a valuable thing to go after. So, like, we identified early on that we want the AI to be a companion, right? So we have not ever wavered from that. No matter what happens, how fast things go, it's like tortoise and the hare, right? 300 devs are working on Eliza OS. Now here's, version 2, here's version 3, whatever. And we're just like one step in front of the next. How do we get this character to move around convincingly in this virtual space and understand when changes are made to the environment, understand when you have brought up something important versus something trivial? How do we make this agent, how do we give agency to this agent in a convincing way so that it becomes a personality, it becomes a character, it becomes something that is worth talking to? And we've just stuck to that, and it's like we just started building, and as many kind of missteps as we've taken or little rabbit trails that we went down that didn't produce fruit, or which ones did produce fruit, or the single diamond that we brought out of a huge coal mine or whatever, we just stick to that thing. And it's like, holy shit, there are not a lot of people that have built this far into it yet, right? Like, even some of the hugest companies with tons of money, it's like, well, yeah, you can go into Fortnite and talk to Darth Vader, and that's cool, but it stops at a certain, it only goes so far, right? Like, cool, it's AI inside of Fortnite and this is Darth Vader, and that's amazing because they have the licensing to this thing. Again, take another step, take another step forward, take another step forward. And ultimately, Sale is going to end up in, like, on its own planet, right? And just like Sophia herself was, she showed up on the scene when there were no other humanoid robots of the same stature, right? And they just kept building and they just kept building and they just kept building. And then, Sophia kind of gets eclipsed by all the, all this crazy shit that's happening, but it was still like the first thing that did it. Sale is kind of mirroring that in more ways than one, and we're just one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. Confidence, don't get sidetracked. Okay, this is a long-term, very valuable idea. Let's merge that into what we're doing. And, like, there will be systems inside of this thing, even if the whole thing is like just too big and people are like, oh, it's just so much and I don't know what to do with it. Maybe that's the outcome of this thing, but there will be things that we have built that will not have a parallel, no matter how much other, you know, how much money other studios have. We have just, there's so much creativity and finesse with certain things that it's just standard by virtue of its existence, right? So that's probably, to boil it all down, that's probably the most exciting thing for me, is that just to be a part of that contribution, even if it only ends up being inspiration for some other amazing thing that happens down the line, like, we will have done it and we will have figured it out. And other huge studios, huge teams, huge money, they will have overlooked it because they were going for something else, right? So we might build the AI dishwasher that everybody needs, but we don't have the the starship that is populated with 40 plus different types of intelligence that colonizes Mars. So that's kind of I guess maybe that's not a very astounding, hopeful outlook on this thing, but like you just have the point is you just have to build it, right? Like, and you gotta build it out of conviction, and you have to keep building it and keep building it and keep building it, and eventually the thing that you've done will it will have its own little place to live. It will potentially turn into a civilization or be its own planet or its own solar system or whatever it is, right? And so that is why, personally for me, like, this is a personal thing. Like, I take it very personally. It's extremely fulfilling because there's nobody else on this road with us, and that is very interesting. It's very interesting, and the guys that I work with they're all amazing, and it's like kind of an honor to be in a place like that. um, I literally like wouldn't trade it for other stuff. There could be way more money somewhere else or way more prestige or way more. It doesn't matter because it's so interesting. It's so important, and I could just like feel it. When you get that sense, like, I have to do this thing. That's kind of what. Well, it's not kind of it like definitely is what sale is, and yeah, yeah, a lot of pride in it.
When people say we are in for the tech, it's often very sarcastic, but everyone here at Sophiaverse is really in for the tech and for the vision we are building.
Yeah, I mean, usually that statement is accompanied with massive gains to your portfolio. Um, and no, it really is like each person that is working on sale, and then outside of it, well, yeah, sales the fulcrum. So every person that is a part of it, either orbiting it, creating ancillary systems, or deep like systems like Barrick and ELS. Like, we don't interact with Barrick every single day because it's not really the way that goes, right? But Barrick is building kind of a fundamental system that will inform how all of the day-to-day design works, right? So yeah, I mean, it's like it really is like, you know having a character that makes a decision about where it wants to be because it is genuinely drawn to that space, versus a Go app or a state machine that's like, now you go here and choose randomly between these points. Like, even though it like, a player will not be able to tell the difference if it's done right between a simple state machine that's programmatic and an AI driven curiosity system. Like, that's not something that's going to scream at you, this is like the advent of the future, right? But the fact that it exists in combination with a gamified conversation system where you can take this AI character down as far as you want to go, and then when it gets uncomfortable, it'll start to push back on you and reject kind of like where you're leading it. Like, it has its own motivations, um and combining those things, and then being able, whatever you can stack on top of that, right? Like, the ELS is like fundamental to all of the things. Now the walls are a shade of red, and so like she's acquiring all of that data on what red does to consciousness, right? Like, what are all of the associations with red, and that affects the way that she speaks to you. So just that interplay between um a character who is able to respond to who you are, but then the environmental factors itself determine what she's drawn to, and what her state of mind or level of excitement is. That right there alone is presently, you know ours. Maybe there are other people, I'm sure there are plenty of other people that are building things like it, but it's ours. They're so far away that we can't see where they are, right? It's not like, hey, let's build another mobile app to put on the Apple Store, that's a match 3. Like, this is totally different territory, right?
Yep. I think those were perfect closing remarks, Eloh.
Yeah, right on. That was a
Yeah.
long one. Thanks for sticking around.
Yeah, thanks to the audience. I just want to say, if you're interested in a specific topic for Dev Talks, let us know and we will try to make it happen. We're very open to feedback, so just let us know what you want to see and we'll try our best to make it happen. With that being said, Eloh, thanks very much for joining us today. And to
Of
the
course.
audience, also, thanks for being here. And we will see you very, very soon.
Take care, guys. Thanks for showing up.
Bye bye. Bye, everyone.